Hi, it's Steve. Today we're going to show you how to change the Fresh Food Door Gasket on your refrigerator. It's a really easy job. All we're going to need is a Phillips screwdriver, a 3/8 socket and ratchet, and maybe a putty knife. Let me show you how we do it. Now to do this repair, we will need to remove both the freezer door and the fresh food door. So we'll start by opening up the fresh food door, and we'll turn the refrigerator off so that it's not running while we have the door off. We close that back up for now. We'll next remove the hinge cover, and it just pops off. And with our 3/8 socket and ratchet, we'll remove the 2 bolts that hold the upper hinge to the cabinet. You may find that there is enough slack in that hinge that you can just remove one of the bolts and loosen the other. Then you can pivot the hinge away from the door. Now with the hinge removed, we can next open that freezer door fully, then we'll lift it off of the center hinge and we can set that door aside for now. Next we'll remove the screws to the center hinge. And most of these screws will accept either a number 2 Phillips or a number 2 square drive screwdriver. So if they're very tight in there, you may want to go to a square drive screwdriver to get a better grip on it. You'll need to open the door to access the lower screw. And just support that door while you remove that last screw. Then lift the hinge off of the door. We can then lift that whole fresh food door away from the bottom hinge. And then we're going to set that on a suitable work surface where we can change the gasket. Now with the door set on a suitable work surface, we can next peel back that gasket, and that will expose a series of Phillips screws that go all the way around the perimeter of the door. And we'll need to loosen each of those screws several turns. You won't need to completely remove them, but just loosen them several turns, and that will allow us to pull that gasket out from beneath the inner door panel where it is sandwiched up against the outer door panel. Now once we've loosened all those screws, and then peel that gasket out from beneath that liner. And you may find in the corners that there may be some silicone or caulking that we'll need to scrape that out with our putty knife so we have a nice clean surface to install our new gasket on. So once we've got all that done, we'll discard the old gasket. Now the new gasket would have came folded in a box. So what we suggest that you do is open the box immediately, inspect the gasket, make sure that there's no damage or tears in either of the corners. And also you'll need to flatten that out. So you can either put it in a closed dryer and let it tumble for a while. You can soak it in a tub of hot water, or if you're fortunate enough to have a sunny day, you can lay it outside in the hot sun on a flat surface. Once it's softened up, keep it in a flat surface until you're ready to install it. You can also use a hair dryer or a low heat gun to soften up and reform any particular troublesome areas. And once we have it ready to install, we're going to lay that around the perimeter of the door liner, and you'll note that on the inside bottom edge of that gasket there is a raised rib, and it will fit into this little channel. It goes all the way around that door liner. So we'll start by lifting up that door liner enough that we can force some of that gasket under the edge. Now as we work our way into this corner, again we want to make sure that we have that rib firmly under that little channel. And once you have a section of that in there, you can just snug those screws up a little bit. Don't tighten them because we will need to be able to slide that gasket, but just enough to hold it from that rib popping out from underneath. We'll work our way along the opposite side of that corner. And if you need to, take a putty knife and just gently raise that inner door panel enough to allow us to fit it underneath of it. Now, once we have the corner fully inserted underneath that liner, we're just going to tighten those screws up so that it can't move anymore. And also look along the outside edge so that we have a nice smooth fit between that gasket and the outer door panel. Once we've got one corner done, we'll work our way along the side and move on to the next corner. And now that we have all of these screws tightened up and we've verified that we have a nice fit all the way around, you'll note in the instructions that came with the gasket that you can reinforce the corners with a silicone adhesive just to keep them from pulling out. And also you can apply a lubricant to the face of the gasket to keep it from sticking to the cabinet. Now, those instructions do specify where to obtain that, and we suggest that you do follow the manufacturer's instructions rather than just buy some commercial grade silicone. So we're now ready to put the door and the new gasket back on the refrigerator. So we're now ready to set the refrigerator door back on. So line up that bottom hinge. And just pivot the door into position, and the magnetic gasket should hold it there until we place our top hinge pin in, and the center hinge will fit down around that. We'll next install one of the screws for that center hinge just to hold it in place. We then open that door fully. We still need to support that until we put the second screw in. Tighten those two center hinge screws securely. Close the door up again. We can then set the freezer door on that center hinge. And again, we'll just pivot that into position. Drop the top hinge pin into the door, and then start that bolt that we removed, and thread those in by hand if you can. Just make sure that we don't get them cross-threaded. Now, we won't tighten those yet until we've lined up that freezer door so that it's parallel with the fresh food door. So we want to make sure that we have the equal gap from side to side, and then we can tighten those bolts. Put the hinge cover back in place. Remember to open the refrigerator door, reset the control, and our repair is complete.